Sophie was born in the body of a boy, but the gender she was assigned at birth never felt right.
I started feeling something was wrong as a child, and that got much worse in puberty. Then, once I'd left home, I made the decision, I'm Sophie now. The old name no longer exists.
We're accompanying the 30-year-old on her journey to her new self. Luca, almost 16, is trans. He experienced diverse reactions when he first came out.
Being trans isn't really socially acceptable. You get put down a lot. There'll always be people who won't accept it.
It's almost half a century since Nora discovered her true identity. Her transition to a new self began in West Berlin in the 1970s.
At first, I had 1,000 questions. How would it all work? Because it's not just about dolling yourself up and heading out on the town. Once you start living your life as trans, that's when the problems come up.
3 trans people from 3 generations. What moves them? How do they want to live? These are their stories. Sophie lives near Frankfurt. The cashier has been living as a woman for several years and has now decided to have sex reassignment surgery. The operation is due to start soon.
I've been waiting almost exactly 6 months for my operation date. And 6 weeks ago, I got the letter saying the operation can go ahead. I'm going through with it. No compromises. I'll be seeing it through to the end. It's what I want.
The 30-year-old finally has an appointment for her first of 2 operations. Until now, she's been making do with hormones, which is the first stage of the actual transition for most of those concerned.
It's crazy what the hormones do. I've been taking them for 4 years now, and a lot has changed. There's a point where I don't see it myself anymore, but others do. They say things like, "You've become totally feminine, you look extremely good." It gives me a real boost.
For the first few weeks after the operation, it will be up to Sophie to make sure that her new genitals retain their ability to function. The necessary stretching aids have already arrived.
Oh God, now it's getting serious. It's really sinking in now. I'm looking forward to this appointment. I'm looking forward to my vagina. And I'll be glad when it's all behind me.
Though Sophie has been managing by herself for years, she certainly doesn't want to spend the days before and after the medical procedure alone. Her best friend Pascal will be keeping her company on the way to the university hospital in Essen.
It's really important for me that my best friend is coming, because he's been there from the beginning. And I don't think I'd cope emotionally on my own. I'd probably cave in and black out.
And that's the last thing she wants. She'd have to wait months for another appointment. Luca will be 16 in a few months. From a very early age, he felt he was a boy, born in a girl's body. His family have received psychological counselling, and they support his transition.
I didn't go through female puberty. I was put on hormone blockers as soon as it started, and that stopped everything. Then after about 3 years, I started taking testosterone, very low doses, so that I could grow more.
The testosterone will make his body increasingly masculine. Flashback. We started accompanying the 12-year-old on camera back in 2019. Luca was being treated by hormone specialist Dr. Wusthoff.
Why don't you stand over here and we'll see how tall you are.
An important stage in Luca's journey was the name change.
My old ID card still says Leonie. I'm leaving it here at last, and it'll be deleted.
2023. Luca is once again on his way to the endocrinologist Dr. Wusthoff, who specialises in the treatment of children and adolescents in Hamburg. In view of the risky procedures, it's crucial for Dr. Wusthoff that the patients be thoroughly informed.
The incidence of trans boys has risen significantly in recent years. 70% of young people who come to us are trans boys. From early childhood, Luca was a typical trans boy with typical boyish behavioral patterns. I'm much more confident with that than when somebody suddenly discovers this trans issue during puberty at the age of 12 or 13 and comes to me saying, "I saw this YouTube video and then everything was clear to me." That's when the alarm bells go off in my head.
The expert works closely with psychologists and psychotherapists to rule out snap judgments. Luca and his mum were also accompanied through the process.
I had a lot of doubts, especially when it started with the hormone blockers. We didn't start with the testosterone, but we gave hormone blockers quite early on, because the older sister started puberty early, and that's exactly what I wanted to spare my child. Everything he was expressing, whether it was just boys' clothes and please no more dresses, the short hair, and later going to the boys' toilet, they were all phases where you could see he was getting happier.
In the mid-70s, it was already clear to Nora that she wanted to go through life as a woman. But it wasn't till many years later that she fully came out. Today, her trans identity is an important part of the 69-year-old's life.
It actually became important to me relatively late, in 2018, 2019, when retirement was approaching, and I was planning this new phase of life. I wanted to become visible as a trans person. Being visible automatically became linked with activism. By that I mean standing up for the interests of trans people, even if it's just to educate mainstream society. That's very important to me, and it's making my last stage of life feel quite meaningful.
Nora was 19 when she moved to West Berlin. Soon she was working in a nightclub, the legendary Chez Romy Hack. There, surrounded by other trans people, the young woman could freely express herself.
We all had tremendous self-confidence, and as far as mainstream society goes, we didn't feel at all, well, they might have seen us as freaks, but that wasn't our problem, it was their problem. So our attitude was, the poor things, they've no idea. The biggest disadvantage in the 70s was being excluded from the regular labour market. It really was the case that trans women mainly worked at night. There were various options, but of course I'd have liked to have continued in my day job if that had been possible. I was working in a large bookshop at the time, but there was no chance of staying there.
6 years after her transition, Nora left the nightlife behind and, now covertly trans, started working as a secretary. She wrote several books as an opera critic. Today, the activist aims to dispel prejudices about trans people.
I think a lot of people are starting from a false premise when they say that trans means living in the wrong body. I've never had that feeling. We're all born in the body we have, and it's our body and we can never leave it. I've never had the feeling that I'm a deficient being that lacks something. On the contrary, I felt I was given something in addition to my body's gender, a different gender identity. So I embody femininity and masculinity at the same time. I think that's pure luxury.
It's October 2022. Sophie is on the way to a new body. Tomorrow, the trans woman will undergo sex reassignment surgery.
Hello. I'm supposed to report somewhere. I'm a bit overwhelmed.
Just a moment.
Here at Essen University Hospital, sex reassignment surgery for trans women has been a routine operation for years. Sophie's best friend Pascal, who has travelled with her for emotional support, is still worried.
Sophie
is a very loving person. She's like my big sister. We've gone through everything together. Joy, fear, pretty much everything.
Why fear?
She's my best friend.
Sophie's main concern is to have a body that's sexually female, but she also hopes the upcoming medical procedure will lead to more acceptance in everyday life.
Those nasty everyday incidences. Yes, you're a tranny. You're not a woman. You'll never be a woman. And a bit of makeup won't make you one. I've heard it all. Once I've had surgery, this trans thing is done with for good. Even if a lot of people will probably still say I'm transgender, then that's their business. For me, the word transgender or trans won't exist anymore.
Existiert nicht mehr.
Hallo. Grüß Sie, Frau Hausner.
In the afternoon, Sophie meets her surgeon, Professor Hess.
Do you have any questions before the operation tomorrow?
I'm really worried about being able to feel the nerves.
Well, we've asked our patients about that after the operation. About 96% say they had some feeling in the clitoris, and around 90% say they were capable of orgasm.
Okay, that's reassuring.
There are various theories on why increasing numbers of people are identifying as trans. The doctor has a simple explanation.
20 years ago, many people didn't even realize that this existed. I myself had little or no contact with it before I came here to the clinic 15 years ago. So I also had to learn how to deal with the topic. I think social acceptance has improved, and people are more informed. That's why there are more people who can find words for how they feel.
Luca is now at a new school where he has to repeat his high school diploma.
Hello, sweetheart. How was school?
Good, yes.
Okay, homework time.
Luca knows there's prejudice against trans people.
In public, I'd never say I'm trans. I don't say openly at school. You just have to be careful who you tell. With most people, it's better not to say anything because once you say it, you're the outsider, and then you're mobbed and bullied and all that.
Luca already experienced this in 2019 when he came out in his film. He'll have to take testosterone for the rest of his life. Does that bother him?
I have asthma too, and I have to take my asthma spray every morning, and it's exactly the same. It's just normal for me. I can't imagine life without it now. If I stopped taking it, everything would reverse in my body, and I'd go through female puberty.
And you certainly don't want that, do you?
No, I don't want that.
For Luca at the moment, it's all about his identity and having the right body. A body he's becoming more and more comfortable with.
In my ice hockey team, some know it and some don't. And it's normal for me to shower with the team just in my underwear. It's no problem. And I think it's really great how they show consideration for me.
Ice hockey is a constant in Luca's life. Flashback. Back in 2019, when Luca was 12, we accompanied him to training. There won't be much time for sport over the next few months. Luca has to concentrate on school and leaving exams. Nora is committed to the rights of trans people. A lot of her self-confidence stems from her job in the 70s as a cloakroom attendant at the Berlin nightclub, Chez Romy Haag.
Of course, there was a certain insecurity in the beginning, especially going to work in the evening and coming back home in the morning. At first, I tried to ignore the looks, but at some point, I actually sought out eye contact. I wanted to be looked at.
Gender reassignment surgery was never an option for the trans woman. Nora loves her body exactly as it is.
Out on the streets, it's unlikely anyone would think I'm not a woman. But when I'm standing naked in front of the mirror, I know my body's non-binary. This is always labelled incongruent, as if there can't be female breasts with male sexual characteristics. I don't see any contradiction in that. If others see it, well, that'll be their problem, not mine.
Nora still feels connected to the queer community. Nights out are rare these days, but she enjoys them all the more, and the feeling of being amongst equals.
I never really played the exotic role. With all my difference, I felt that I needed to live a normal life. That was always the goal. As different as I am, it should always be normal. I'd like for the queer community to stop being seen as the other by mainstream society, but rather as a part of society. We belong in all our diversity, and our lifestyle is as normal as any other.
The day of gender reassignment has come for Sophie. The night was short, and Sophie hardly slept a wink.
We can do this.
I'm already terrified.
Don't worry, it'll be fine. You'll wake up later and think, yes, finally.
So, you've been called.
Great.
She's been waiting more than 6 months for this moment.
You're here, aren't you?
I'm here.
Now her best friend has to wait 2 hours. That's how long the operation usually takes.
We were here about 2 or 3 years ago and already made all these preparations. The registration, the procedure, waiting list and so on. And now the time has come. Now we're here. Now it's plain fear. Respect for the operation. How will it go? Will everything be intact? Will there be feeling down there? That's the biggest fear.
Sophie's operation, which is fully covered by health insurance, proceeds without complications. And the doctor's prognosis is also favourable. The patient has a good chance of a fulfilling sex life.
We know from the follow-up surveys of our patients that there are also holistic changes, even if only the genitals have been operated on. Obviously, a lot happens before surgery. The essential things happen before: the coming out, the psychological aspect, and also the hormonal situation. The surgery is only a small part, but it still gives another boost to the holistic female feeling.
Summer 2023. Luca has graduated from high school and has already been accepted for an apprenticeship as a piano maker.
Well done on your graduation, darling.
Luca's grandmother remembers his childhood.
It's a funny feeling when you first have a girl and you do the pretty hairstyles, the braids and so on. But then you just accept it. It's him and that's it. He's a boy. And the rest is in the past.
It wasn't something you gave much thought to. It was more a gradual process, a development. I saw him as a very strong person because he always knew who he was, despite all the obstacles in his way. Of course, there were always setbacks where you thought to yourself as a big sister, I'd love to give that person a piece of my mind. Because it was hurtful, of course.
What were the setbacks?
Among other things, bullying at school.
Flashback. Luca spoke openly about being trans in a film about him 4 years ago.
So a few people saw my film and they handled it really well. They asked me, of course, and I thought I shouldn't deny it or anything. Just admit it openly. And we talked about it a little. It was a huge relief, and it kind of formed a bond. Now I prefer being around people who know about it than the ones who don't.
Luca has achieved a lot. The issue of sex reassignment surgery is still on the table.
It's definitely good to have the option, because then you can decide for yourself whether you want it or not. Of course, you can't do it till you're 18, and I think that's a good thing. And your body has to be mature, of course. And it gives you time to think again, so you don't rush into anything.
Many of Nora's friends identify as queer. Marianne is one of them. The younger trans man comes from a different generation to Nora, but they are both familiar with the problems faced by trans people. Hate crime against minorities has been on the rise for years.
It starts online and social media. Then the verbal harassment spills out onto the streets, and it turns violent, physically violent, and trans people are a prime target.
Being visible and taking a stand, a balancing act for many of those affected. Because, like everyone else, they also need privacy and anonymity.
People don't believe that I'm trans, and I can be covertly and anonymously trans anywhere if I want to. But I also think it's important to take a stand now and then and say, I'm trans, by the way. As long as people are still being beaten up out there, it's important to draw attention to it.
The friends are concerned about current political discussions which portray trans people as choosing their gender on a whim, and then manipulating children.
Education in schools is, of course, super important because otherwise trans children will be bullied and marginalized. And when parents come and say, don't drive our children crazy, children can't be made crazy. Sometimes discussions are needed, and the parents probably don't want to look at it. So they say, leave our children alone. I mean, if a child is unsure about themselves, then you should discuss it.
We don't become trans by imitation. There's this idea that if trans people are constantly being talked about and reported on, always present in the media, there could be this copycat effect. But you don't become trans by reading or watching something online. That's just not the reality. I never struggled with being trans, not for a moment. On the contrary, discovering my trans identity is the best thing that could have happened to me. I truly am an absolutely happy trans person. That might sound stupid, but it's true.
Almost a year after her sex reassignment, Sophie is on her way to her hairdresser to get hair extensions. And there's news. The 31-year-old is in love. Her new partner doesn't know that Sophie is trans.
He's such a Frankfurt boy. It's all football, clubs, United. And if it's never been part of your world and you know nothing about it, you'll react very differently. So I'm going to keep it my little secret.
That's hard. I don't know what I'd do.
Lots of people say I should tell him. Others say, don't tell him.
What if it came out some other way?
I've thought about that. My mum brought it up.
Then he'd probably ask, why didn't you tell me yourself?
I did bring it up indirectly. I said, imagine you met someone like that who was a man before. I mean, these days anything goes. Nothing's abnormal anymore.
I'm happy for you. Enjoy it. You never know what's going to happen these days.
Well, if he finds out, then that's how it is. But then if he rejects me, I'll know for sure it was all a big lie.
For trans people like Sophie, There's no one right way. There are lots of different options.
If someone asked me now and said, I'm unsure, what would you do? My tip would be, listen to your inner self. Look inside yourself to see what you really want. I could just say, do it, but then you might end up unhappy, because it really is a major intervention. It's also very painful. A lot can go wrong. But I don't regret a single thing. Nothing at all.
Nichts, null, gar nichts. Ich bin total sprachlos. Hammer. Ich weiß nicht, was ich sagen soll.
Schön. Voll der Hammer.